What if I told you that most of the time, you're not actually thinking? I know, it sounds kind of crazy, right? But what if a lot of what we call learning is just, well, an illusion? We're about to break down how you can fundamentally change the way your brain works, and we're taking our cues from one of the smartest people of the last century. So, right out of the gate, we have this bombshell of a quote from the physicist Richard Feynman. Now, he wasn't trying to be a jerk here. He was pointing out a critical bug in how our brains are wired. We spend our whole lives accepting things, but not really getting them. So the real question is, how do we fix this?
You know, the whole problem really starts when we're kids. Feynman's own father taught him this incredible lesson that shaped his entire life. He'd point to a bird and say, "Son, you can know the name of that bird in 5 different languages, but you'll know absolutely nothing about the bird. All you know are the labels, the sounds that people make."
And here's that exact difference in action. On the left, you just see a list of names. They're just sounds, right? But look at the right. That's real knowledge. It's observations about what the bird actually does. It's cleaning itself because tiny little lice are eating its feathers. See? That is real understanding, not just memorizing a word. And that, right there, is the core of the issue. So much of what we call education, it's really just learning names for things. We learn the name of a historical event, or a scientific principle, or some new business strategy, but we hardly ever ask the most important question: what's actually happening here? Real thinking isn't about collecting labels. It's about taking reality apart to see how it works.
Okay, so how do we actually start doing this? Well, first up is habit number 1, visualize everything. This is all about translating those abstract ideas into something real. It's about taking concepts and turning them into pictures, feelings, and experiences you can actually imagine inside your head. Let me show you what that looks like.
So when Feynman was learning about atoms, he didn't just memorize the definition, the smallest particle of an element. No, he'd imagine himself becoming tiny enough to see them. He'd picture them bouncing around and crashing into each other. When he studied electromagnetic fields, he'd imagine he was an electron and ask himself, what would I feel? What force would be pushing me or pulling me right now? And this is so crucial. If you can't form some kind of mental picture of it, you don't really get it. I mean, think about it. This is why we can cram for a test or sit through a boring presentation at work and then forget everything a week later. It's because we memorized the abstract words, the formula, but we never connected it to anything real. We totally skipped the most important step. All right, so once you can actually see something in your mind, it's time for habit number 2, ask why. This is all about waking up that powerful, relentless curiosity that we all had when we were kids. I mean, just think about it. Kids are absolute geniuses at this, aren't they? They'll drive you crazy with this endless chain of but why until they get to the absolute rock bottom foundation of an idea. But then we get older, and we just stop. Why is that? Honestly, it's because we're afraid of looking stupid. We'd rather just nod along than risk asking what feels like a dumb question. Feynman used to tell this story about a student who could recite the definition of the uncertainty principle perfectly, word for word. But when Feynman asked him what it meant, what was actually happening, the kid was totally speechless. He had the words, but he hadn't done the work of thinking. So the rule is super simple. If you can't explain it simply in your own words, you don't really get it. Not yet. And all of this leads us to what might be the most powerful and maybe the most counterintuitive habit of them all. Habit number 3, embrace ignorance. It turns out admitting you don't know something might just be the smartest thing you can possibly do. Let's just be real for a second. This is the single biggest thing that stops most of us from actually learning. We've been taught our whole lives that not knowing is a sign of failure. But what Feynman figured out was that it's the exact opposite. It's the starting line for any real discovery. The second you pretend you know something you don't, you just slam the door shut on ever understanding it. It's over. Feynman was famous for this. He'd sit in these high-level seminars with the world's top physicists and ask the most basic questions, the ones everyone else was too embarrassed to ask. Admitting you're ignorant isn't a weakness, it's an intellectual superpower. It's what unlocks the door. So we've got these 3 habits, right? Visualize, ask why, and embrace ignorance. But what's the one thing that ties them all together? The answer is really surprising. It's not about discipline or being a genius. The real secret is play. It's realizing that real thinking isn't supposed to feel like a chore. This story is just incredible. So after the intense pressure of working on the atomic bomb project, Feynman was totally burned out. He decided he was just going to play with physics for a while. No pressure, just for fun. So one day he's in a cafeteria and he sees someone throw a plate in the air. He notices this weird little wobble in its spin and just thinks, huh, that's funny. I wonder why it does that. He wasn't trying to solve some huge problem. He was just curious. So he goes back to his office and, just for the fun of it, he works out the math. And that playful little detour, it led directly to the work that won him a Nobel Prize. And this really gets to the final most important point. We look at people like Feynman and we just think, wow, they're on a whole other level of smart. But the real difference isn't some magical brain power. It's persistence. It's the willingness to just stay with a problem, to not be satisfied with the first easy answer, to be curious enough to keep digging until you really truly understand. Anybody can do that.
So, the next time you hear a new idea or read a headline or you're sitting in a meeting, don't just accept it. Force your brain to really engage. Ask yourself, can I actually picture this? Can I explain this in my own simple words? And most importantly, why is it this way? That's not just where thinking begins. That's where understanding is actually born. So, what will you start questioning today?